It was supposed to be just another quiet Wednesday on the Browns' practice field. No headlines, no pressure, just reps. But by the time the final whistle blew, the entire quarterback battle had been flipped on its head, and almost no one saw it coming. Staff members were texting people mid-practice. Coaches stood frozen like they'd witnessed something they couldn't explain. And players? Players walked off the field, giving each other looks like they knew something had changed, something big. One moment, it was a routine install. The next, it felt like the entire locker room had silently chosen sides. And Shedeur Sanders wasn't just in the middle of it. He was the reason the ground shifted beneath everyone's feet. What really happened that day goes way beyond bad throws and good timing. It exposed something deeper, something the coaches weren't ready to admit. A spark that turned into something you can't take back. Because that afternoon didn't just tilt the QB race. It forced the Browns as a team, as a franchise, to stop and ask themselves a question they weren't ready to face. Did we just watch our rookie take over this team? Right in front of us? And if the whispers are true, it wasn't what he said that changed everything. It was what he did over and over again until no one could ignore it, not even the guy who thought the job was already his. Wednesday started like any other. Practice scripts were laid out. Coaches moved with their usual mechanical focus, calling out assignments and checking position groups like it was just another page in the season's playbook. Players stretched, warmed up, and jogged onto the field with that midweek mix of routine and repetition. From the outside, everything looked normal, but for people close to the team, something felt off almost immediately. There was a tension in the air that nobody could quite name. Not loud, not obvious, just present. It lingered in the way assistants kept exchanging quick, quiet glances. It showed in how even the equipment staff stood more still than usual, not pacing, not talking, watching. And some of the veterans? They walked onto the field with a quiet seriousness that didn't match the tone of a typical install day. Nobody said it out loud, but the energy had shifted the second warm-ups began. Later, observers would struggle to explain it clearly. One staffer would say it felt like something was about to crack open, a kind of calm before the storm that raises every sense you didn't know you had. A few players said it felt like more eyes were watching, not from the stands, but from within the team. Like every move suddenly mattered more than usual. And everyone knew it, especially the quarterbacks. And that's when the whispers started. First, it was just a few murmurs on the sidelines. Then phones started lighting up, staffers texting friends and insiders before practice had even hit full speed. Something was building, and people felt it. Not because of what had happened, but because of what everyone sensed was about to happen. At the center of that slow burn was the quarterback room. Everyone knew there was a battle unfolding, but this wasn't supposed to be the moment it blew open. Gabriel was the presumed frontrunner, a third-round pick still expected to ease into the job at a controlled pace. Shedeur, though talented, was technically further down the depth chart, a developmental piece, a maybe one-day guy. But by the time the quarterbacks started warming up, every casual movement looked charged with unspoken weight. Footwork drills weren't just drills anymore, they were scouting opportunities. Simple routes now felt like statements. And with every throw, voices lowered and focus narrowed. The field felt smaller, the stakes felt real. People standing near the QBs said there was a strange quiet that settled over that part of practice. Not because things slowed down, but because everyone was watching too closely to talk. It was no longer about who looked good. It was about who looked ready. And even before the first full-speed reps began, that answer was starting to take shape. One quarterback carried himself like he belonged. The other, like he was trying to keep up. But this wasn't the moment that changed everything. That was still coming. The first live reps weren't supposed to mean anything. It was early in the session, designed for rhythm and timing, nothing the coaches couldn't clean up with a whiteboard and a little film review. But from the moment Shedeur Sanders took the field, something shifted, something sharp. His foot glanced the turf as he stepped into his drop, calm and collected. His eyes scanned the defense, and he delivered the first throw with almost mechanical precision. Snap, red, release ball out. No second guessing, no wasted movement. Just crisp execution, the kind that usually takes years to develop. Receivers caught in stride. Timing routes clicked. Even coaches, not the type to show emotion during drills, paused for an extra beat. It wasn't just a good rep, it was a clean one. The ball left his hand with confidence that felt unusual, unshaken. Almost like the moment wasn't too big for him, it was finally just right. On the sideline, some players started watching a little more closely. Then came Gabriel. His first snap didn't look out of place, but his footwork? A little off. He took an extra shuffle before setting his base. The next throw flew a beat late, drifting slightly high. The receiver hauled it in, but had to adjust, breaking the rhythm of the design. Nothing catastrophic, but definitely not clean. You could feel the difference instantly. By the second set of reps, the contrast wasn't subtle anymore. Sanders stepped up with that same composed energy. Quick reads, tight mechanics, eyes downfield, and throws that hit exactly where they were meant to. There was a rhythm developing, one that elevated the pace of the offense. Rather than reacting, Shedeur controlled tempo. He looked like the guy pulling the strings, not just playing his part. Meanwhile, Gabriel's throws began to slip further off target. A check down floated too long. A short out turned into a contested catch. You could see the internal clock starting to speed up in his head, hurrying through mechanics as if he could feel the pressure growing inside each rep. It wasn't dramatic, not yet, but anyone watching, really watching, could tell. Two quarterbacks were on the same field, but they weren't playing in the same world. Around the field, the energy slowly began to rearrange itself like iron to a magnet. More eyes turned towards Shedeur, conversations shifted, and the sideline, once scattered, leaned in. No one called it out loud, but the body language said plenty, because this wasn't just about who had better form. It was about momentum, presence, command, and one quarterback had it. The other looked like he was trying to remember how to get it back. But what happened next? No one was ready for that. Whatever tension had been rumbling under the surface exploded quietly but unmistakably as the session pushed forward. This wasn't a flash-in-the-pan throw or one lucky sequence. This was Shedeur Sanders stepping into full control of the field, one rep at a time. And he didn't just stay sharp. He got sharper. Footwork, tighter. Reads, faster. Throws, pinpoint. He started hitting windows that barely existed. Intermediate shots between defenders, quick slants in stride, even a back shoulder out that had coaches blinking like they needed to double-check what they just saw. And every time the ball left his hand, the offense moved like it knew exactly where it was going next. Play after play, the unit stopped looking like it was learning an offense and started owning it. Receivers stopped adjusting to routes, they hit their landmarks, and the ball was already there. Backs hit the flat, expecting a check down. It came perfectly on time. Even the rhythm of pre-snap motion felt crisper, as though Shedeur's calm was bleeding into everyone's operation. And the crazy part? He wasn't saying much. No shouting, no bravado, just execution and quiet command. A different kind of leadership, the one that makes a team lean in, not for a speech, but because they believe. Then something happened that insiders now say shifted the temperature of the entire practice. A high-leverage sequence. Red zone reps. Receivers packed in tighter. Timing windows evaporate faster here. It's where decision-making gets exposed. But not for Shedeur. He dropped back. Eyes snapped to his second read. Fired a dart low and away, right where defenders couldn't reach it. Touchdown. Perfect placement. Veteran players, especially the ones who've seen dozens of young QBs flame out under pressure, started giving those subtle sideline nods. Not the kind you give to the next guy up, the kind you reserve for the one who just might be the guy. Even a few defensive backs, known for their pride and trash talk, reportedly just shook their heads quietly and turned away. They knew. By the time the last rep in that set rolled around, you could feel it. The field didn't just tilt in Shedeur's direction. It gravitated toward him. And while all of this was happening, Gabriel stood near midfield, helmet off, unreadable expression on his face. He hadn't touched the field in over 15 minutes. He wasn't being iced out. But as Shedeur kept stacking precision throws and running the offense like it was his, there was no good time to put Gabriel back in. The rhythm was too perfect to interrupt, too alive to reset. And deep down, everyone could feel that truth settling in. This wasn't hype. This wasn't potential. This was a quarterback taking control of an NFL team in real time. And for Gabriel, the unraveling hadn't even started yet. When Gabriel finally stepped back onto the field, it wasn't supposed to feel like a comeback, but it did, and everyone watching could sense it. He wasn't walking in to build momentum, he was walking in to reclaim it. But by then, the temperature had already changed, and not in his favor. The offense that had flowed so effortlessly under Shedeur's command stiffened the moment Gabriel took control. The rhythm flattened. The energy cooled. His first throw came out just a hair too high. Not disastrous, just enough that the receiver had to climb for it and got taken down on contact. Next rep, he hesitated briefly on a quick slant, and the ball arrived a split second late. Completed, but awkward. Uneasy. That awkwardness only grew. Insiders described his footwork as unsettled, rushed when it needed to be pocket clean, hesitant when it called for decisiveness. Small details started to crumble, a late shoulder lean here, an inconsistent drop step there. Timing routes didn't snap. Checkdowns floated off target. He wasn't missing by much, but he was missing consistently, and in the NFL, that's everything. Players noticed it. You could see it in the way they reset their stances, glanced toward the sideline, or jogged back with tightened shoulders. Frustration wasn't spoken, it leaked out in the smallest ways. Silent head shakes, quick side glances. And Gabriel? You could almost feel the pressure building in his body, one shoulder twitch at a time, one overcorrection. Suddenly, he wasn't just trying to execute, he was trying to prove. And that's when things always fall apart. The breaking point came during the red zone period where everything tightens and mistakes get magnified. Gabriel took the snap, hesitated, pump faked, then fired toward a corner of the end zone that wasn't really open. The ball never had a chance, straight into the arms of a lurking defender. Pick. And then? Silence. Not crowd silence. Not media silence. Something colder. Practice field silence. The kind that makes everyone freeze for half a second not because they're stunned, but because they instinctively know it's bad. One coach put his hands on his head. Another just stared at the ground like he wanted to fast forward time. Receivers walked back to the huddle, shaking their heads, not in anger, not in disrespect, but with the kind of quiet disbelief you feel when something's clearly broken and nobody wants to say it out loud. Players didn't need to hear a speech to know what that pick meant. The throw wasn't just a misread, it was a message. A signal that the guy who was supposed to take control of the offense was now fighting to hold it together. And inside that fight, Gabriel started losing himself. From there, it unraveled slowly and completely. Every rep felt heavier, every read took longer, and the more he pressed, the worse it looked. Instead of self-correcting, he spiraled. Instead of coming back clean, he came back tense. The pressure didn't just speed up his throws, it shrank his vision. He wasn't leading the offense anymore. He was chasing it. People around the facility said you could see it in his posture. His shoulders stayed tight, his helmet chin strap loosened after plays. He kept glancing toward the sideline as if waiting for that one gesture of reassurance that never came. But there was no saving this stretch. No reset button. This wasn't just a quarterback having a rough day. This was a quarterback unraveling at the exact moment his competition was playing the cleanest football of his life. Under that kind of spotlight, every mistake casts a shadow. And every shadow makes it harder to find your way back. By the time Gabriel came off the field, the vibe was different. Not just tense-charged, quiet conversations had turned into watching eyes. And even as coaches kept the session moving, the emotional undercurrent was impossible to ignore. Around Shedeur, guys stayed locked in. Linemen stood a little closer. Receivers lingered near his side of the field. Running backs nodded subtly after each sequence. Nothing dramatic, but enough to notice. Even from the sideline, you could see it happening, teammates gravitating toward him. And for a quarterback like Gabriel, who came in expecting to lead the huddle, not chase it, that shift hit harder than any broken play. According to sources close to the team, that was the moment the silence finally cracked. Multiple insiders say Gabriel approached Sanders near the sideline during a break in drills. At first, it just looked like a standard check in two competitors, maybe trying to reset. But then heads started turning. Whatever was said didn't stay quiet for long. People near the exchange say Gabriel's voice carried sharp, frustrated. He wasn't cursing or yelling, but there was emotion, like he couldn't hold it in anymore. Not after the way receivers had started talking to Shedeur between sets, not after the way players seemed to drift toward him after each rep, not after the way the coaches suddenly weren't making eye contact. He reportedly questioned whether people were falling for flash over fundamentals, wondered out loud why the team seemed so quick to rally around the rookie. Shedeur didn't raise his voice, didn't bark back. According to those who saw it, he just stood still, emotionless, and pointed not at Gabriel, not at himself, but at the field. A single motion. No words, but the meaning was clear. If you're confused about what's happening, go look at the tape. And that one silent response hit like a punch to the ribs. A few players nearby instinctively stepped in, not to escalate, but to shield it from growing. They weren't choosing sides out loud, but the act of circling around the two quarterbacks, placing physical space between them and the rest of the practice, that said enough. Staffers moved quickly too, sensing the temperature spike. Coaches didn't blow whistles, nobody called it an incident. But for those who were there, something unspoken happened in that moment, something that finally made the quiet loud. The quarterbacks didn't yell. Nobody threw a punch. It wasn't a meltdown, but it was real. And for anyone still pretending this was just a healthy competition, that exchange served as a hard reset. Because what happened near that sideline wasn't the moment the shift began. It was the moment nobody could ignore it anymore. Gabriel wasn't losing a battle. He was realizing it. Not because Shedeur outworked him behind closed doors, but because everybody on that field had already made up their mind, with their effort, with their alignment, and with their silence. No official statement had been made, but the conclusion was obvious. One quarterback had taken over. The other was just trying to survive the fallout. Practice ended the way most do, with silence and sweat. No closing huddle, no dramatic speech, no coach barking about accountability. Just players walking off the field, heads down, shoulder pads unstrapped. But the silence hit different this time, because everyone knew what had just happened. And inside the locker room, the truth didn't need to be spoken. It was already written on the walls in body language, in glances, in the way people moved. Veterans are never the first to jump on a wave of hype. They've seen too many false starts, too many young guys flash and fade. But that day, a few of the older players did something small, but telling. They approached Shedeur, not with long advice or speeches, just subtle nods, a quiet knuckle tap to the shoulder, a short pause at his locker on the way to grab gear. The kind of interactions that don't happen by accident. Not in this league. Younger players noticed. They always do. In locker rooms, hierarchy is studied like gospel. Guys pay attention not to who's shouting orders, but to who gets the silent respect. And that silence was starting to bend towards Sanders, even from players who had no reason to pick a side. Guys who had held their opinions close during camp trying to stay neutral now drifted in Shadeur's direction like it was the safe place to be. Gabriel, meanwhile, didn't face open hostility. No one was childish. No one disrespected him. It was worse than that, because it was invisible. Conversations stopped lingering around his locker. Casual chatter moved further down the bench. Players who usually stuck close just weren't there. No cold shoulders, no conflict, just space, just absence. In the NFL, that's how you know the shift isn't coming, it already happened. And through all of it, coaches kept their mouths shut. Not one gave a statement about rep counts. No promises were made. No explanations offered. But players didn't need one. The ones who'd been in this league long enough can read silence better than they read coverages. And this silence was loud. One assistant coach, normally vocal and quick with corrections, walked through the locker room with arms folded tight and eyes low. Another exited without saying a word. Kevin Stefanski steady. Composed Stefanski didn't even acknowledge media questions about rep distribution after practice. Just a calm no comment that answered more than any quote ever could. Inside the building, it was already understood. Something fundamental had changed, and it wouldn't take a press release for that reality to spread. The word moved fast. Front office members started having quiet hallway conversations, whispered questions about whether the depth chart they'd carefully constructed was already under revision, not because someone said so, but because the team had decided on its own. And what made it all more undeniable? Shedeur didn't force it. There was no chest thumping, no demand for respect. He just went back to his locker. Same expression, same demeanor, letting the film and the feeling in the room speak for itself. Because by the end of that day, he didn't need to convince anyone. He already had them. While players were peeling off pads and the locker room quietly reorganized itself around Shedeur Sanders, something else was unfolding a few floors above the facility. Tension. You could feel it in the hallways, in hushed conversations behind half-closed doors. In the tightly clutched folders, the restless pacing, the unusual silence among front office staff who usually speak with full certainty. Because what happened that afternoon didn't stay on the field. It climbed the stairs. Sources close to the Browns say that within an hour of practice ending, higher-ups in the building began reviewing tape again, not for technical analysis, but for answers, for clarity, for some way to explain how the quarterback they invested in just months ago, the one they put their third-round stamp on, looked like he was regressing right before their eyes, while the guy they'd taken as a backup A fifth-round long shot was suddenly gripping the offense with both hands and not letting go. Scouting reports were reopened, combine interviews reread, internal projections revisited. Not out of curiosity, but out of quiet panic. Because developmental timelines in the NFL operate on balance, expectation versus reality. And when the maybe-later guy looks ready right now, that timeline doesn't bend, it snaps. And it wasn't just internal buzz. League insiders say that word spread about the Browns' quarterback drama almost immediately. Executives from other teams started checking in, curious about what exactly happened at that practice. Some were direct, some were subtle. But the message was clear. Something major had just shifted, and the whole league felt it. Even analysts who were lukewarm about Cleveland's draft started adjusting their narratives. The tone changed from "they reached on a luxury backup" to "wait, did the Browns just stumble into a real one?" Inside the front office, the situation wasn't just awkward, it was delicate. Because Gabriel's camp had been paying attention too. His agent, already monitoring every detail of his development, reportedly ramped up communication within hours of the practice ending. Calls were being made, not public and not dramatic, but pointed. Because when the temperature of a quarterback room shifts that fast, agents don't wait, they prepare contingencies. And there's buzz still unconfirmed that Gabriel's camp is quietly exploring how to avoid getting buried on the depth chart. Whether that means requesting clarity, a reset in media positioning, or even testing interest elsewhere, one thing is clear: they've seen the writing on the wall. Meanwhile, Shedur's circle? Silent. No pushing, no politicking, no demands, just quiet confidence. Whispered words from someone close to the situation described it best. They're letting the tape do all the talking. That one practice, it was the conversation. And that tape? It's now the most watched 90 minutes of the Browns' offseason. Because this wasn't a temporary spark that got guys excited. This was something you can't fake: composure under pressure, placement in rhythm, presence that shifts a room without saying a word. And now, the pressure isn't just on Gabriel. It's on the Browns. Do they double down on their original plan and risk ignoring locker room momentum? Or do they pivot and admit they may have found their guy months, maybe years, earlier than expected? Whichever path they choose, everyone's watching now. By the next morning, it wasn't just a Cleveland story. It had become an NFL story. What was once just quiet buzz inside a closed practice had now spilled into front offices, media group chats, and analyst circles across the league. Executives started calling people close to the situation. Scouts requested the full tape. Quarterback trainers who'd spoken to these guys pre-draft were watching the all-22, frame by frame, not for gossip, for answers. Because if the reports were true that a fifth-round rookie had taken full control of a quarterback battle in one practice, that changes everything. Whispers turned to curiosity, curiosity turned to speculation, and speculation turned into one unavoidable question echoing around the league. Did the Browns just accidentally find their franchise quarterback? The irony? No one expected it to happen this fast. Shedeur Sanders came out of the draft with promise, for sure. But he wasn't projected to push for a starting role in year one, let alone during the first few days of real competition. He was a long-term project, a guy with mechanics to refine, reads to speed up, and time to mature. But what happened at that practice forced everyone to throw the handbook out the damn window. Analysts who once critiqued his tape were now posting side-by-sides of throws from that day. Sports radio shows were debating whether Cleveland needed to rethink their quarterback plan immediately. National insiders hinted at a surprise riser internally turning heads in camps. Meanwhile, Gabriel was being talked about in an entirely different tone, not with anger, but with concern. Because when you lose trust in the eyes of your teammates, it's not just your job that's at risk. It's your trajectory. And one moment, one stretch of bad reps in front of the wrong crowd can flip a career before anyone even updates the depth chart. People close to Gabriel say the pressure hit hard, that he could feel the team shifting beneath him. One source even compared it to standing on sand, while the tide pulled out slow at first, then suddenly you're knee-deep in soft ground with nowhere to plant your feet. And the more silent the coaching staff stayed, the louder the message felt. A day earlier, Gabriel was penciled in as the developmental guy with upside. Manageable pressure, a long leash, time to grow. Now, he was watching reps evaporate, watching faces drift, watching momentum and belief stack in someone else's favor. And as for the Browns, they were suddenly staring at a decision they never thought they'd have to make this early. Stick with the plan, or pivot into the unknown. The office may have built the hierarchy, but the locker room had already rewritten it. Veterans weren't waiting for press releases. The team had already begun to follow Shedeur. His performance that day wasn't a hot streak, it was proof. Proof that presence, poise, and precision matter more than pedigree, more than draft status, more than what anyone thought going into camp. And maybe the craziest part of all? Shedeur never asked for the spotlight. He just stepped into it and didn't blink. By the time the sun dipped behind the trees and the Cleveland facility emptied out for the night, the energy inside the building hadn't cooled, it had just gone quiet. Not hesitant, not confused. Changed. You didn't need a press conference to spell it out. You didn't need Stefanski to stand in the media room and confirm restructuring reps or rethinking roles. Because everyone from the coaches to the players, the executives upstairs to the interns walking hallways already knew what had happened. Wednesday wasn't just a good practice. It wasn't a breakout moment. It was a turning point. And what made it so undeniable wasn't one throw or one mistake or one reported confrontation. It was the slow, steady collapse of a plan and the equally steady rise of something organic, something that can't be manufactured. Belief. Shedeur Sanders didn't walk into that practice expecting to take over a franchise. He didn't need to tell anyone it was his time. He just played like time didn't scare him. Like pressure was something he'd already learned how to carry. And the team? They reacted without waiting for permission. In the NFL, that's rare. And when it happens, it doesn't go backward. What unfolded on that field rewired the Browns' future in real time quietly, but permanently. One quarterback won the plan, the other won the room. You could see it in the way players lined up during post-practice media, in the eyes of linemen who had already started protecting Sanders like he was their guy, in the way rookie receivers watched him during install meetings, more attentive than they had been in weeks. It wasn't about status. They didn't care that he was a fifth-rounder or that Gabriel had his name on preseason banners. They cared about rhythm, timing, clarity, leadership, and Shedeur gave them all of it. Gabriel, for all his tools and pedigree, became a still frame in a fast-moving picture. This wasn't just about who threw better, it was about who moved humans better. Staffers began whispering that the organization had plans to slow walk the timeline, but the locker room wasn't walking anymore, it was already moving. By the end of that day, the Browns weren't debating if Shedeur was going to take over. They were trying to figure out whether anyone could stop him. And that's the part most people won't understand unless they've lived inside those walls. Leadership in pro sports doesn't arrive with titles. It walks in quietly. It wins moments. It flips assumptions without ever needing to be loud about it. And when it happens as naturally, as forcefully, and as unanimously as it did that Wednesday, no coach can undo it. No depth chart can delay it. No front office can ignore it. You could feel it in the film room the next morning, the long pause coaches took during Sanders' red zone reps, the subtle grins that spread across the offensive line room when someone rewound the replay just one more time. People who went in looking for flaws came out asking one simple question. How is this kid already this calm? And that question doesn't just translate across a playbook. It echoes inside decision rooms. It starts rearranging how draft picks are viewed, how practice reps are distributed, how narratives are shaped. It forces decisions early. It forces hard conversations. It forces people with power to admit, we may have been wrong. As for Gabriel, his story isn't over, not even close. One bad practice doesn't define a career. One emotional day shouldn't erase the work he's put in. Every quarterback gets humbled at some point. Some recover, some don't. And whether his future still lives in Cleveland or somewhere else, one thing is clear, he felt it, all of it. The shift, the isolation, the silence that says more than words ever will. He wasn't just dealing with mistakes, he was dealing with the weight of watching a locker room shift its loyalty in real time. And no rep count or coach's note could change that. Not after everything that happened. Because this wasn't about two quarterbacks anymore. This was about a locker room's heartbeat, an unspoken vote, a moment where one player didn't just win a job, he won trust, he won presence, he changed the way people walk into the building the next day. And that's the cruel, beautiful, brutal part of the NFL. Sometimes it doesn't take weeks, or months, or seasons. Sometimes it just takes one afternoon, one practice, one moment, where everything snaps into focus. And when it does, the film tells the story. The body language confirms it. And the locker room, the truest judge in the sport, makes the final call. No announcement, no interviews, no breaking news required, just silence and belief.